Welcome to Life with Strings Attached Biography Edition. I'm your host, Jamie Gale. In this special biography edition of Life with Strings Attached, we joined legendary guitar maker Ulrich Teuffel on location in his workshop located in southern Germany. So Uli, thank you for hosting us here in your workshop, in your village. Where, for the people who don't know, where are we exactly here?
We're here in Niwa, which is part of Bavaria. And this village is called Holzschwang. This is where I started building my guitars.
Yes, your first instruments as Teufel were down the street at another building, and this is your second workshop.
Yes, in another building. Or the first guitars I have built were actually in the house of my parents. So in the basement there was a little workshop from my father and me together. So father for repairing things or doing stuff, and for me exploring my abilities to work with wood and metal and all that.
Yeah.
As a young boy.
Right. So, each person has sort of moments in their life which, if we remove that moment, we wonder who we would be. And so, if you wouldn't mind taking me from, where and when you were born, and then just those moments that you feel like, if that wasn't there, you would be a different Teufel here before me,
Yeah. So I would start with, I was born in in a place in Bavaria. We moved to some other places. I ended up in the city of Stuttgart, being in the kindergarten. And then we moved into this region, and we had a larger house there as we could have in the city of Stuttgart. And this house had a shed in the garden where my father set up a workshop. Very simple, no heating, no water. It was just a shed. And he took me to his workshop. So he's a watchmaker, an educated watchmaker and an engineer. So he had something with his hands going on, but not really with wood. So his thing was fine mechanics. And it took my attraction, the workshop. So I started to follow him, and he encouraged me in doing things, whatever I want to develop for myself, or whatever I want to discover for myself. And my grandfather, from the mother's side, he's a furniture maker. So things came together that I felt attracted by wood also, the same way as fine mechanics, which I knew from my father. And it ended up that I built furnitures or, things to play with when I was younger. And I thought I realized that building things or putting things into life, into their life, is something that is really fulfilling. It's something that gives you a lot of joy. But I never thought that it would be my profession, because I had no picture of my profession that time. I was more following the way of my father and thought I will end up in a company doing fine mechanics, becoming an engineer probably. So that was more my thinking that way. And then I went to a high school, which was technically oriented. So you made the same school degree, which enabled you to study anything you want. But you already got a kind of technical background. And we had a workshop there in the technical high school, where we learned how to file metal and file metal in terms of precision. And working with the lathe and all that. And that was an eye-opener to me, because my experience was that with this system and with this, this black box, so to say, you come from no skills or just average skills to something which is made, and made in the meaning of not only, oh, look, I have made this. No, made like it comes from a machine, even if it was filed, and something from a higher, from a higher spirit or from a higher competence. And that was really eye-opening to me. The metal work first, because the woodwork was something that I learned by myself and I improved and improved. But seeing what you could do with metal so that it looks like it comes from a metal working company or from the industry was really eye-opening to me. And then I made my school degree and started to do a deeper education in metalworking and car building at a company that was taken over by Mercedes later. And that was a part of the biography of my family. First, before you study and become an engineer and work in a level above handwork, you should have the experience what handwork means and what the needs and the capabilities of the team of workers could support to your ideas or theories or formulas as an engineer. So I regarded it as a step of my education to become a trained car builder, but not to remain in this business as a car builder. And with that, I got even more look into how to build things as such. And after this education, I did civil service because we had the draft that time. So you could choose between military and civil service. I did civil service. And that was a kind of pause where I considered what to do after that. And I thought and of course, I forgot. During all that time, I already started to fall in love or get magnetized by guitar building as a hobby in my workshop. And it started with a friend of mine who showed me a guitar that he has built. And I didn't know that you could build guitars. I knew that you can build stringed instruments and there are schools for that, but I was just not really aware of that. And I had the feeling that I don't want to go to a guitar building school because I was not sure if I want to become a guitar builder. I was a guitar player acoustically, but it was not really my focus that time to become a guitar builder, but I was hooked by you can build a guitar. So Siggy explained me there's a book which I bought and that shows you how to build a guitar. And it was the book of Donald Brosnack, How to Build a Guitar, I think was the title. And so this gave me the opportunity, if I follow the steps of the book step by step, I will eventually build my own guitar. And I did that. And I did not build the same guitar that was supposed to be built in the book of Donald Brosnack, because in this book there was a portrait of 3 Steve Klein guitars. And that was the second impact, that these guitars really catched my attention, because when I saw them, I saw, oh, those are really decent, interesting guitars, while the guitar of Donald Brosnack was something, with ornaments, and it didn't appeal that much to me. So I already built my own guitar with the techniques of that book, but the guitar was a design after Steve Klein. So I just looked at those guitars and quoted them in my guitars without knowing is the bracing clever or not. It was the first guitar.
Yeah.
And it was okay. It was not bad. The second guitar was already good. And that was all hobby in that time.
How old were you at this time?
With the first real guitar, acoustic guitar, I was, I think, 17 or 18.
Okay.
And the first stringed instrument was a balalaika. You don't have to bend sides. And I was 12 or 13, but
Okay.
and this is a typical thing. You put frets where you think it should be because the distance has to get smaller and smaller. So you do that, but you don't set it into relation with a scale.
Why balalaika?
Because there was that desk made from solid wood, from spruce, and I sliced it into boards and balalaika because it seems to be accessible, or it seemed to be accessible for me to build that. And I think there was a fairy tale book, a Russian fairy tale book, and there was an image, a picture of a balalaika in something like that. And the story was good enough for me.
Yeah.
And I could identify with the hero in that book. Maybe it was something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Not more. So it was a balalaika. It could also have been a cigar box guitar.
Yeah.
Not bending sides.
Sure. Yeah.
And but that didn't happen. So there was no book with the story in my hands at that time. And so the real guitar, the second guitar I've built before my education as a car maker, was already the guitar that I used to play all the time when I were with my Boy Scouts, and it was my folk picking guitar, so it was a good guitar. And then with the civil service, so stepping back to that thought from before, I had this kind of break where I could reflect, and profession came closer. Like when I enter university and study engineering, then it's clear then I'm on the tracks and will end up as an engineer. And I was doubtful if this would be the right choice, because I knew when you work as an engineer and if you have skilled hands and can build things, this is not going to be your profession. You can be able to do that, but you will always do it as a hobby, because you do constructions and not executions of constructions by hand. And so I decided to give me the chance after my civil service to try to build guitars and to sell guitars. And then two things came together. One thing was that I was building only acoustic guitars, and the folk boom was over. So there was no demand for real acoustic guitars. In Germany, the folk boom was over. I don't know what was in America that time. And there was no demand for real acoustic guitars. The only acoustic guitars that were demanded or accepted at that time were black Ovation stage guitars, thin, no feedback, piezo pickups, but those were just interfaces. I mean, the guitar was an interface, but the tone was something different. I like the Ovation tone for sure, but it's not the dream guitar you want to build. A rock ballad guitar. So that was the guitar of the 80s. And I realized that I probably can't go ahead with building acoustic guitars. And so I started also to build electrics, but I had not much idea of electric guitars. But friends of mine, they played electric guitar, so I also started to play electric guitar. But I got even orders for that. Like many biographies start like that. A friend of mine wanted to have me to build an electric guitar, and you agreed on a really affordable price. It was pretty much the components to buy plus $100, stuff like that. And that was my first electric guitar. Second, third followed, and so it spread it rumors. Because there was no electric guitar maker and acoustic guitar maker. When they say acoustic, I mean flat tops, not nylon string guitar, classical guitars. And so it spreaded words that there is a guitar maker who can do improvements or tweaks on your guitar, repairs, and who can even build guitars. And so it started to get traction in my workshop, but it worked out only because the rent of my workshop was very friendly and cheap. And so it gave me a period of time where I didn't come into financial trouble. So I was living from very few money then. And the next step was that I was somehow, I mean, the gap from me falling into love with the image of Steve Klein's guitars and eventually building Stratocasters, which I didn't understand that time. So I didn't know what a Stratocaster really means, how genius this guitar is. It was just the guitar that everyone had, and it was regarded as the best guitar without any knowledge about it, why it is. And so it was just a guitar, like a Les Paul was a guitar, and I got into an encounter of a PRS that time, and I understood already from the perspective of making that this is a real modern new guitar built in a very clever way, and because I got it for repair, and what I did is, I think what many other luthiers also do it, so I completely disassembled the guitar and build it together later to understand how it's built.
Right.
Yeah.
And it came in for like a string change or something. You didn't need to disassemble the guitar.
Maybe
you did that for yourself.
pickup change, or there was something with the controls. I don't remember, but I looked at any single part, like how is the rotary switch wired and stuff like that, to understand what it is. And so I realized that what people want me to build is, because I was working only locally and I had not the perspective, because my background is not working self-employed. My family background is engineer, and you will work in the management or construction of a company then. So there was no experience with self-employedness. So if you are the son of a self-employed furniture maker, you will get a grip on that much easier than I did. So I worked in my local area only. And of course, this local area was conditioned by the perception of guitars as they are. So there were those trends like the Ibanez Jam or the Jackson guitar. So can you put on a kind of sharp Explorer headstock on this guitar, a Jackson headstock? So order by order, I built different guitars which were just copies or wishes of my clients. And I had an own guitar series that I ran in the 80s, which was called Dr. Mabuse. It was my interpretation of what I have seen until then and learned until then. So some things of Paul Reed Smith also flew into that. And or of what I saw from Paul Reed Smith, like how to build in the neck of the guitar. And but it was still kind of conventional guitar, because it was absolutely clear to me that something like a Steve Klein guitar transformed into an electric guitar, I mean, this fascination of a Steve Klein guitar will never work with me here in a place. I will never sell that guitar. And so I came to the point where I was somehow a little bit frustrated, and I've asked myself, so is that all? I mean, going ahead with that. And so I took the opportunity to apply for a design school. And that was the second thing that my father also reflected on me. He mentioned, I have an artistic branch also in my life tree, and it could be something between engineer and art. So there is industrial design. That could be interesting for you. From his side, I think still thinking of being employed in a company, working as a designer. And so I applied for a study. And there was another thing, another happy punch. When I applied for a design school, I applied for a school which was newly founded. And it was a school that offered an education in design, industrial design, graphic design, or visual communication, which was a new term that time in '92, scenography, media arts, and art history. and the school started with 50 students at all. So each department had maximum 10 students. And the teachers were all successful teachers, people coming coming out of experience, either from another art school with a high recommendation, or in my case, it was a very successful designer, industrial designer, Hartmut Esslinger, who founded Frog Design. And he also had, I mean, he was not an educated or a professor when his biography led to teaching on school and staying at school and being happy to be a teacher. He was a very successful designer, working for Sony and Apple. So he designed the Apple Cube. I mean, the Apple computer that changed the Apple identity from a, say, Windows, not Windows, from a machine-looking computer into something that gives you a rabbit hole into communication with this black box. And so he had another thinking. He was not a professor. He was just kind of teacher. And when we applied for this, when you had to apply for a design study, you had to apply with a map of art pieces that you made. And normally these art pieces, so there are schools that train you for applications for design school because it was highly demanded. So when you enter a design school, or when you're accepted at a design school, at the same time, maybe 20 people are not. And I knew that, and I had no idea how to apply for that. So what I did is simply showing things that I made before. So I made freehand pipes to smoke, where I expressed myself in formal language, shaping things, and they were just to smoke, you know. So I added a pipe in there, or photos of a pipe. I think it was photos because it could be not objects, but only documentations of. So I took photos, or a friend of mine took photos of it. Then there was a jewelry part. Then there were some sketches of pipes, photos of my designs, of my guitars. And that's all. And the normal way was, I realized with this map, I was accepted to come to the next level of evaluation. And in the next level, I met people who did it the right way. And the right way is to draw and draw and to draw a rabbit and to draw a hand and whatever you have to draw. So those schools prepare you for that. And I was not really good in drawing. I was okay, I would say, but I was not trained in drawing because you can learn how to draw and how to paint. Aside of having talent, being really talented, you don't have to learn. You can do it right away, you know, because you don't do anything else than drawing because it's your passion. It was not my passion. It was more a tool for me to draw, to visualize for myself.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com. This space is normally reserved for brands who make stories like this possible, like the Dario and the Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop. If your company belongs in this conversation, let's talk. We partner with brands who value craft, culture, and the quiet power of a well-placed idea.
And they said, "How did you make it to here?" to be accepted to that level. And I said, I had no idea. And the funny thing is that Hartmut Esslinger was in the commission to accept those students to come to and give them a the next chance. And I was one of those. So
he pushed you through. He pushed you through.
No, he gave me the chance to come to the next level of evaluation. And that was a 2-day meeting at the School of Karlsruhe. And I remember also then it was an old brewery storage,
Mm-hmm.
reconstructed for this art school. And there was an elevator to drive up. And I drove up with, that day at 9 o'clock, I drove up with some students and with a freak up in the elevator to the design school assessment.
Yes.
And I realized that people, the students were, or the appliance were reacting differently when that freak entered the lift, and I did not. So I got into talks with him, like nice day and or nice leather jacket, because it was a red leather jacket.
Yeah.
And a biker jacket, and so it ended up that I realized when we exited the elevator that he is Hartmut Esslinger, so he will challenge us today.
Yeah.
And so we got some tasks to paint something or to draw something, or it were group tasks. They watched us how we acted in a group.
Yeah. Yeah.
To start a kind of project. And at the end I was accepted. And later Hartmut told me once that this unconventionality was something that attracted him. So that he saw that I want to do something, but I was not sure what it will be and if it will be the right thing, because I was not sure if I want to become a designer as such, but I want to learn something about design, because this is necessary now for me. And this is something that he saw in me, and therefore he said, this guy will be given a chance. While this is something he told me later, while in the team of the school evaluation, the opinion was not 100% for me, because it was not the right way to apply for. And that was always the biography for me as a designer, also in the education of the school, that I was not sure, will I work as a designer, because I did not feel as a designer. So I have a strong respect for designers, because they offer as a service their creativity on a snap,
Yeah.
on spot. And to do that all the time without cocaine and alcohol is really difficult, I think. So I haven't encountered cocaine, alcohol, yes,
Yes.
but
Yes.
I really respected people who can do that. I mean, this is the high school of design. And what I did in my studies is I got a grip on design, what it can do to things, and how you can, I mean, when I told you that in my technical high school, I learned how to transform rusty iron into something made.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got an idea how to, in a design school, how to transform an idea in something really intentional, to give birth to a product. And there was a moment when I was not sure if I will go into media design and stay there. It came from the projects that we did there, but somehow, I don't know, it ended up that I worked as that I started to transform that design into my guitar work. And that happened also by incident, by an accident. So Micha, an old friend of mine and customer for guitar repairs, and so he brought his guitars to me. He's an old friend of Reinhold Bogner. And Reinhold Bogner was already successful in America with his amplifiers, and Micha had the idea, and Reinhold Bogner was represented or they started to represent Reinhold Bogner through Sigi Schwarz, who was a very successful musical instrument retailer, and he was the distributor for Reinhold Bogner. He's also from the same place. They know each other from years before. And Micha called me and said, "Hey, Uli, I have an idea. Shouldn't we do the Frankfurt Messe together? I mean, you with guitars, and we with Reinhold, it's a family, typical family thinking,
Yeah.
because Reinhold is from my place. I know Reinhold as a freak far beyond Hartmut Esslinger being a freak. I mean, Reinhold is the definition of a freak.
Yes.
And so there was no way, there was no chance not to know Reinhold Bogner when you went out in the night in Ulm, in my place, Ulm and Ulm. So I knew Reinhold, and Micha said, let's do that together. I don't know why. I have no idea why he came to this idea. And I remember in that time I was working in a very successful exhibition project together with two other designers in my art school. And that was very satisfying. And I thought, oh, that could be also a profession for me to work to design exhibitions or such. And then came the call of Micha, and it somehow pulled me back into reality. Can I say reality?
Yeah.
And so, yes, give me 1 week to think about. And then I said yes. And it was, I think, 6 months before the Frankfurt Messe. And I knew that I first have to finish this exhibition project because it was financed by an exhibition center, and we had to deliver. And we were working on the exhibition setup and the exhibition construction and structure.
Yeah.
And after that, I can get into building guitars for the Frankfurt Messe, because one thing was clear: I will not show up with my Dr. Mabuse series of guitars or JFK basses. I have to design a new instrument for that Messe.
Okay.
Because I come from a design school now, and I can't show up with the handicraft guitars.
So how far in advance of the Messe is this?
So the hard work, the sleepless nights, was around before Christmas. That was like 3.5 months before the Messe.
Because the Messe was always March and April.
It's always March, yeah. And I think this was middle of March. So it became serious in November when I returned from Karlsruhe, from the city where I did the project, and I ended up in my farmhouse workshop, and I knew, oh, you have done the contract, the personal contract. I will do that with you, and now I have to deliver. And that set me into a very sensitive mode of, I have to design something now, and under many people, many creative people are working under pressure. And this is why they need drugs for compensating that. And I was also working under pressure. I had the idea of designing a guitar that reflects the thinking, the way of thinking that I learned at that school. And a kind of conceptual thinking that Hartmut Esslinger taught us, that you question a product or an idea and maybe disassemble everything and then put it together in another way to come to a serious point. And so I had the idea of doing something with of deconstructing a guitar and reassembling it in another way. And then came the idea that I can use all the functional parts of the guitar and make them versatile, interchangeable. Once you reassemble them, you can reassemble them in a way that you have, so to say, interfaces, which make those parts connectable easily without a process of manufacturing, like guitar building, and for the user or the owner of a guitar. And that became closer and closer in the winter over Christmas. And then I started. It was first drawings, a rough made prototype, like a 1-hour guitar, that showed me it worked, the idea. And then I had to design or define the single parts of this guitar. And that was really a tough process, because it was all in a very, very short time, because it was sure that when I go to the messe, I have to present something which is a ready-made product and not only an idea, because this is not why you go to a messe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in that time, I lost, I think, more than 10 kilograms, many sleepless nights.
Mm-hmm.
And the result was when I first presented this guitar series, which I called Birdfish, it was 5 guitars from the same idea, the same look, but in different configurations, different pickups, different amount of pickups, different tone bars
Mm-hmm.
on the guitar. And I was more than exhausted after the messe. So the messe was a promising success, which
Mm-hmm.
gave me the belief that I can continue to do that. I got orders for it,
Mm-hmm.
but I was so exhausted that after the messe, I remember I stood away from guitars in total for, I think, almost 2-3 months, because it hurted me so much. I lost weight, I couldn't sleep anymore because I had to get finished to the messe, a typical designer thing.
Yeah.
And I think that was also one of the reflections or the things why I realized that I could never work as a designer. So, but I have a new tool in my workshop now. I have the tool how to build guitars. And this is something that which I had already before I entered the art school, but now I have a new tool how to shift a guitar into another level, and it could be any kind of guitar. So the Birdfish was that concept for a deconstructed guitar, but you don't do it again and again and again. So, but when I want to go ahead and communicate in guitars,
Mm-hmm.
I have the tools now in my workshop,
Mm-hmm.
and that was promising to me. So I started to build the next guitar, or to offer the next guitar to the market with another theme. It was the theme, an ergonomic guitar, a guitar huddling your body, and very formative or formal, very expressive in its shapes, or very very courageous in its shapes, and also offset from the regular path of how to design guitars. There was the model Coco. It was a guitar with a wooden core, but covered with acoustic foam and epoxy carbon fiber and epoxy outside, and then painted.
Yeah.
Still with slidable or adjustable pickups, but that was just possible in that design, but not necessary, because it was not the core theme of that guitar. And 3 years later, I made another model, which is called the Tesla. I'm still building that model, and that was a guitar that had to do with expressions in modern jazz music, experimental jazz music, experimental noise music, and it was also a formal concept, because I think when you want to make that new interpretation of music, that say noise, because to 99.6% of all people this is just horrible noise, and to 0.4 people it's inspiration. And I think those people who make in this kind of music, they are not going to make it with a visual identification which is already possessed by rock music, by the work canon of music that we already knew in close before 2000, year 2000.
Yeah.
And so I designed a shape for that music, which is a very reduced shape. So it's, for me, it's my most important model which I made, and the design I'm most proud of, more than Birdfish and Tesla and Coco, which got which was transformed later into another model.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because it's a very silent shape, and still polarizing, somehow,
Mm-hmm.
and forces you into a reduction of playing.
Mm-hmm.
So these three models were the models which were the foundation of my guitar building career internationally. And from then on, I still continued until I think 97 was the last guitar which I have built, which had nothing to do with these models, but it was, a client who had models from myself, and he wanted to have another Dr. Mabuse.
Sure.
And he financed my studies of industrial design because he paid for me building guitars for him. So, of course, I continued to build a guitar for him, but I did it secretly, unofficially. And I would never would have never brought a guitar like that to a messe, to a trade show. And then in 2002, I disconnected building the Coco because I realized that I got an allergic reaction against epoxy. And even if I wore gloves, it happened. So I stopped to work on the Coco and destroyed the tools and everything because it were molding tools, which I needed to. There was a lot of investment, intellectual and hand investment into building this guitar, but I couldn't continue that. So funny, the lucky thing is, or the funny thing is, later it came out that it's not an allergy against epoxy. It was a kind of light sun allergy that I had. So when I was exposed to sun, I got those red spots on my skin, and it was a coincidence when I worked on epoxy and sun. So now I'm still working with epoxy, not in large surfaces like that time, but there is no allergic reaction, but with sun. And so I redesigned the Coco when I went into CNC and CAD manufacturing. And it happened through a project that I did for Fender in 2003. I got into contact with Fender through a friend who was a good friend of Frank Werner Braun. I don't remember the name. He was a designer at Fender. He's from Hamburg, and he introduced me to the friend of Frank Werner Braun. He was not at Fender there that time anymore, but he introduced me to Richard McDonald's, who was the marketing vice president of Fender. And he was interested in he was watching. I mean, Fender, the whole industry is always watching what's going on on the NAMM show. And he was interested in what I'm doing. And I had the idea of designing a guitar together with Andreas of Andreas Guitars, which was called the cover guitar, a guitar that is a pure industrial guitar, form follows production, and with the benefit of a kind of acoustical concept, which means you have a roughly cut probably CNC cut guitar body, but you don't have to sand it because it's covered with two plastic shells. And the plastic shells came from the thinking of when you play a violin, you disconnect the body of the violin from your muting soft skin and flesh with a chin rest. So it makes it more comfortable to play, but it makes it sounding more freely at the same time. And so I had an idea about that. This could be a concept for a guitar, but it ended not in a guitar with a kind of framework around it, but because being a designer or thinking as a designer, it ended in a guitar that was totally concealed by a shell that distanced the sounding core, vibrating core from your body. And then when you have plastic shells, you have a canvas, you
Mm-hmm.
have a communication potential of this guitar
Yeah.
to print things on it and to make it interchangeable. And that was the time when the Nokia not smartphones, the Nokia mobiles had those interchangeable covers. So it was hanging in the air.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was working on a concept for on a presentation for that. So I got invited to Fender
Mm-hmm.
and presented it there in front of the board to this concept of cover guitar, but it was just a visualization.
As a guitar builder and a player, you have a sense for when something's working right. That's why so many of the world's best trust D'Addario. Unmatched tone, perfect intonation, and strings made to the tightest tolerances in the industry. That reputation is no accident. It's the result of 400 years of being obsessed with quality and innovation. D'Addario. When you know, you know. This space is normally reserved for brands who make stories like this possible, like D'Addario and the Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop. If your company belongs in this conversation, let's talk. We partner with brands who value craft, culture, and the quiet power of a well-placed idea.
And so they agreed on a contract, a development contract. How could that sound? So we made a contract that had the goal of I will show them together with Andreas and his brother how plastic shells will sound on a guitar body. So it was not really refined to it was more a kind of material thinking approach
Yeah.
in order to keep myself free of to deliver too much than I can deliver in that time. But for sure, when for us it was sure when we do that, we will already go directly into designing that because if the guitar will be built, we are already right in the process of delivering a shape and everything. And this is how I had to start to work with CAD seriously, because in my university time or design school time, CAD was something new and not really. The school was newly founded and we had no tech heads who installed CAD right away from the beginning of the school. So some students were somehow into that, but it was in 92 and it was not really working. And so I had two-dimensional access to CAD, but not really 3D. And with this cover guitar, I entered into 3D design, and that was a total new world for me. And together with the production machine of Andreas guitars, we made the prototypes for this study of a guitar. And that showed me what you can do with CNC in order to come to a result which is unachievable by hand and not saving time in production. That was not my thinking. It was more like if you do 3D printing, it mostly ends that designers see the potential of 3D printing. So it's not that they print shells, for instance, it's that they print structures which are not solid, but very rigid, very stiff, because it can not be done with injection mode. It can be done only layer on layer. So there is potential in that. And this is something that I saw in CNC manufacturing. And so this is the way how I came to CAD and CNC later, because Andreas Guitars was taken over by Thomas de Ginfeld in 2003, I think, or 2004. And Thomas de Ginfeld took the machinery and inventory, and Andreas had this 5-axis machine. And they decided not to continue the production of these guitars for a while, but at the end it didn't really work out on the market. So they sold the machine to me. And I continued to work with the machine. And my first project that I made on this CNC machine was a redesign of the Coco, because the Coco was so three-dimensional with different functional axes for parts and controls, which is easy to do in molding,
Mhm.
in a mold process, which I did,
Mm.
but almost impossible in carving by hand.
Mhm.
But with this machine, I realized that I can make a successor of the cocoa
Mhm.
in wood, and without the machine, I couldn't do that.
Mhm.
And so I redesigned the cocoa. I streamlined the shape a little bit. The cocoa was in the proportion of length and width was different, so the Niwa is a little bit longer.
Mhm.
And so I started to work with the CNC machine with this guitar, and that opened a whole new uh, potential to me to also to implement that into making my aluminium parts for the Birdfish, which I had to cast before with disadvantages of the density of the alloy of cast. So I transformed everything that I first designed for a hand process, for a handmade process, into something that is reenacted on a CNC router.
Mhm.
And that gave me a lot of control about my whole manufacturing. And
Mhm.
that was in 2007, the Coco NAMM show.
Niwa.
Niwa. Yeah, I still
Mhm.
say Coco because it's the name of my dog.
Yes, yes, I know.
And yeah,
Yes,
and we encountered the dog today
yes, yes, we
quite
did.
oftenly.
Yeah, yeah. And I asked you if there was a connection to the guitar,
Yeah, but I
or
think
if they were both connected to
yeah,
something else named Coco in your history.
yeah, but it's not. It's the
Just
name
coincidence.
my daughter named it,
Yeah, yeah.
and I think she was into Coco Chanel
Ah, yeah.
when she considered a name for the dog.
Yeah, yeah,
And Chanel is not really good for a dog, so Coco.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So that's 2007.
Yeah,
Eh,
2007.
And then the next significant moment.
After 2007, with the CNC machine and with this new workflow, it started to become more. I entered more calm waters from the rough sea of doing always new models. And one thing that was really important to me is that I'm not going to make every the second year or third year a new model, because it's not going to make sense.
Mhm.
So the models or the guitars you build are your messages,
Mhm.
and they are reflecting you, what you think as a personality. And if you want to send out a clear personality, you have to condense it into a
Mhm.
very short information, and not this could also be, that could also be, oh, and I have also something to say about this
Mhm.
and about that. And this is quite often a delusion when you're not really aware of what you present through your brain in an object message, be it a guitar or something else.
Mhm.
And so I did another model, the Antonio, which is a guitar that I designed with a charming allowance to myself of doing a retro guitar,
Mhm.
because I was known for modern guitar, for designer guitar, some people said,
Mhm.
and I wanted not to be caged in that identity. And it was time I grew older, or went older, and reflected more the history of guitars, because Birdfish and Coco or Niwa and Tesla is still a kind of rookie young man thinking,
Mhm.
go and show it to the world. And the older you get, the more you understand where you come from, and where, in my case, the guitar comes from.
Mhm.
And there's a deeper history and a deeper meaning and a deeper, just as it is in the guitar as such,
Mhm.
which I didn't accept and therefore did not recognize when I was young, because I wanted to do something different, something new, and that's not always necessary. And so I started to redesign a guitar as such, and do a kind of retro model. But obviously it was clear that I don't want to end up with a kind of offset guitar in a vintage color, retro in that meaning, because this is not a good sibling in the family of my guitars, and it's not what I wanted to do. And I started, and I was still connected to the electric guitar, and I just didn't find a good way of a retro interpretation, so a historical interpretation of an electric guitar, without doing something artsy, like doing a reenactment of a Telecaster in a high precisional mode, like cherishing the Telecaster and working so precisely as it was never intended, and doing a model like that. So that was not my idea, because it's too artsy or too intentional. And so I came to the conclusion that it might be better to step much more back of in the timeline, and not looking at electric guitars but acoustic guitars. And that was inspiring to me, because it drew me much deeper into guitar history, and it's still doing. But for a matter of identity, it was still clear that I'm not going to build an acoustic guitar, because I'm an electric guitar builder. And I was working with the shape of a classical guitar, and the name of this project was Antonio, named after Antonio de Torres. And out came an electric guitar which has a quote to the classical shape of the guitar, but the proportions of the body are also very much quoting, very subconsciously, quoting the violoncello. So the bowed instruments, which are referring to a period of culture which was so formative to everybody of us, even if we listen to classical music or not, because there is almost nothing more iconic than the shape of a violin. And in terms of music. And the Antonio model also quoted that ancient period of stringed instrument, because of its high shoulder and the short neck in relation to the shoulder, just because the upper body bout is much higher than on a normal guitar. And it had also an acoustic reason for that, to have a low frequency vibration in this longer wooden fiber. And the Antonio has all elements that make you think that it has to do with an acoustic guitar, because there is a sound hole, but it's not a sound hole. It's just a circular pickup cover for a pickup which is eccentric in that cover. But this guitar has only a neck pickup, and it has a bridge which is a wrap around bridge, or a stud bridge. How do you call them? The bridges where you
It's a wraparound bridge.
A wraparound bridge, but it's not. It's made from aluminium. The core is aluminium, but it's covered with wood.
Yes.
With the quoting the shape of a classical guitar bridge. So when you look at this guitar, you think it's somehow an acoustic guitar, but it's not. It's an electric guitar.
Yeah.
Sound chambers and stuff in. And that was a very satisfying project, because it allowed me to release myself from the constraints of pushing the envelope guitars, so to say. But at the same time, I realized that maybe there's only one or two guitars left for me to communicate myself through. So the oeuvre, the work canon is getting closer and closer to its completement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was finished and released in 2012, if I recall
2012.
correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so that brings us up to date in your models, more or less. There are some variations since then, but yeah, is there any other important parts that have happened sort of since then that are important for the historical record at this stage?
Not impacting parts.
Yeah.
There were no moments of impact which changed my life. So
Yeah.
I think I was on tracks since 2007, 8,
Yeah.
10. I saw the film
Mm-hmm.
of my career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I knew where it will go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
And I don't think that there will be any irritation that shifts me into something totally different. Because it could have happened that I
Yeah.
would have never studied design.
Yeah.
Everything could have happened, but now it's clear
Yeah.
somehow, which is good, which I need also at my age now.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Yeah.
Thank you for these questions.
Yeah.